Hi, and welcome to Financial Modeling with Tom Hooper. On the first day of class, nobody really wants to talk about financial models, but everybody seems to want to know about how their grade is going to be calculated. So I'd like to do this little course grade model, as I call it, to give you an introduction to Excel, some of the things we're going to learn in this class. Try to touch on a lot of different things, and maybe you can refer back to it over the course of the semester. So let's check out the course grade model. The syllabus tells us that our grade will be calculated in 4 parts. Homework, participation, and attendance is a small amount. 4 equally weighted quizzes worth almost half. By the time we drop one of those quizzes, each one's going to be worth 15%. Then 3 presentations worth 10% each, and a final worth 20. Let's jump over into Excel. See if we can model that. Now in class, I'd ask you to follow along with me, but in this video, I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to watch me struggle with typing. Notice when I got something with a number on the end of it, if I drag that little handle at the bottom right, it counts 1, 2, 3. That can save you a lot of time, but it can also be very dangerous if you don't intend for it to count. So be careful using that. Any little shortcut here is Control D to copy that down. Let's make that drop negative, back that one out. Another little shortcut is if I want to type 10% with all 3 of those cells highlighted, Control Enter would enter them all at once. You can expect both of those on the first quiz. Third little shortcut I'll show you is if I'll hit the Alt and the equal key, then it assumes I want to sum up everything above it. So if I hit Enter, it will accept that. Come over here. I'm going to put in some hypothetical scores, and I'd like to calculate the weighted average of those scores. First, I want to put a border above that. So if I'll select the 3 cells that I want a top border on, I'm going to hit the Alt key. And I could come up here and try to work through the little drop-down menu and go to top border, but we're not going to do that with the mouse in this course. Notice that top has the P underlined. That's going to be important here in a moment. So I've got the cells I want to work with selected. I'm going to do Alt, and then these letters pop up, F, H, N, J, I. So H is for home. If I hit Alt and then I hit H, then some more letters pop up. And one of them, this B, looks like it would drop down that borders, B, and then P, because that P is underlined in top border. Don't get in a hurry and type T, because T would actually give you thick outside borders, and we don't want that. We want a top border. So I will hit the P key. And if I move my cursor away with these little arrow keys on my keyboard, I have a border across the top. Let me undo that with Control Z, everybody's favorite shortcut. Now I will do Alt. I better select those cells. So I'm going to hit the Shift key and the left arrow key to select all 3 and do an Alt H B P. So anytime I want a top border, it's Alt H B P. Now I want to get up here quickly, so I'm going to hit the Control up arrow and then go right a couple and hit Min. Oops. So I want to get up here, so I'm going to hit the Control up arrow a couple of times and then the right arrow a couple of times and Min score. Notice I'm moving around with those arrow keys on the keyboard. And so I'm going to put this grading scale in a little bit backwards. It'll make sense later. Now instead of typing all those, I could have just typed 2 so that it knew that I wanted to count by tens, and then I could use that handle over here and count it up to 100. Couldn't do it from here because it would think I was counting by 60s, but if I'll get 10, it knows I want to count by tens. And then we'll do A, B, C, F, no. Then we'll do F, D, C, B, A. I didn't need to go to 100, so I'm going to get rid of that. And this will make more sense in a moment. But the first thing we want to do is see if we can calculate the weighted average score. And so the way we'd do that is we'd take 5% times 85 plus 15% times 85 plus, you see where I'm going with this, but hopefully it's making you want to throw a rock at your monitor or something, because that's going to take forever if I do that. But that's how we calculate weighted averages. Much better way to calculate weighted averages would be to use something called sum product. By the time I hit equal, SUMP, sum product is the only Excel function that starts with those 4 letters. So I can hit the tab key and it will finish putting the function in and give me a parentheses. And then I can come up here with my arrow key, control up, control shift down, and then shift back up. And so that's the first range I want. Then when I hit a comma, notice down here, sum product wants some arrays that it can take weighted averages of, multiply one range by another and add them up. So now that I hit the comma, it highlights the array 2. So to get to the array 2, I'm going to hit my up arrow, control shift up. Oops, that was too far. It took me all the way to the end of that range until the next cell would have been blank. So what I'm going to do now is hit space and down arrow. Now I've got the 2 ranges that I want. I should hit an end parentheses and finish it out and hit enter, but I'm just going to be lazy and hit enter anyway. And it knew that I wanted that end parentheses on there. So hopefully you did the math in your head and it makes sense that sure enough, that's 85 that we're getting in the course. Before we put a letter grade on that, it's kind of bothering me that I can't see the rest of these labels over here. That column wasn't wide enough. So at this point on the first day of class every semester, I ask if anybody knows how to fix that. And usually I can get a good volunteer to say, come up here between these 2 columns, let your cursor turn to this different symbol and double click. Unfortunately, when we do that, it finds the longest label in the entire column and makes the column wide enough for that. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to use my favorite shortcut again, Control Z, to undo that. What I want to do is Control up, Control Shift down. I just like it to fit the widest one of those cells in that selection. Now, there's a way to do that in Excel. If you're on the home ribbon, you can go to the format and auto fit the column width. And notice that's got an I underlined. But of course I'm not going to use my mouse. I'm going to come back here and use Alt to get to H. And then to O. And then that's the I will get us the column width. So I'll hit the I key. And now it widened column A just enough to get these labels. So you can expect that on quiz 1 for sure. Let me use my favorite shortcut again, Control Z to undo that and show you that quickly we're doing Alt HOI or Alt HOI. You're going to do that about 50 million times this semester. So just learn Alt HOI and it will widen the column to just your selection of cells. Another thing you're going to want to do a lot is, say how I did that. So move these arrow keys over, Control Shift down, and then hold my Control Shift, and this time use the right arrow. And I want to center all of these things in the cell. I could reach up here and click that button, but we're not going to do that in this course. We're going to hit Alt H for home, and then AC for align center, I guess is how they came up with that. So I'm going to come over here. My second favorite shortcut is repeat. So I could do an Alt HAC. In fact, that's probably what I would do because it takes less thought than repeating what I last did. But in this case, I'm going to do a Control Y. And it does the same thing for me. I could also do an Alt HOI while I'm at it and widen those columns. And now things are starting to look a little bit better. What I'd like to do is come up with a letter grade. And so the first day of class, I like to ask students, how would you calculate a letter grade from this 85? And some of them might say, well, I could say if this is greater than or equal to 90, then give me an A. Otherwise, if this is greater than or equal to 80, then give me a B. And notice what I'm doing. I can use numbers in these formulas without any quotes. In fact, they can't use quotes on numbers. But if it's text, then I have to use the double quotations so that Excel treats it as text. This is a horrible way to do it, but I'm going to go ahead and finish. So I'm finished with my nested ifs here. If none of these turned out to be true, if C14 is not even greater than or equal to 60, then let's just say, okay, in that case, use the F. And now I have to end all these parentheses. I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4 to do that. So 1, 2, 3. Notice if I lose count, I can go by the color code that it gives me if I'm working down here. If I'm working up here in the formula bar, I can't do that. So the colors tell me that I got it right. Let's see if this formula works. Well, I got lucky it did. How do I center that? Alt HAC. Okay, so what if I got a 60 on the final? I'd still have an 80 and a B. What if I got a 50 on the final? I'd have a C. And if I got a 20 on the final, wow, pretty strong coming into a final, still get a C with a 20%. What if I skip the final? Okay, then I'd get a D in the course. But you get the idea. We can change numbers up here and see how it changes our calculations and our letter grade. Now, the most popular question in my class is, I didn't see that formula. By the way, you know how I got that to show up? A couple of ways I could do that. I could double click, and then I could see the formula. I could click up here, and it doesn't do a very good job of showing me the formula, but at least now I'm color coded up here. That's kind of nice. Or I could hit the F2 key. And so let's stop and talk about, so the F2 is how I'd edit that. Let's stop and talk about shortcut types here. The first thing we did was things like control. I don't know if I copied anything or if I pasted anything, or I don't think I've made anything bold yet, or haven't made anything italicized, or haven't made anything underlined yet, but you get the idea. Those are what I'm going to call hotkeys. The other thing was these menu navigation keys. So I'm going to call them menu nav shortcuts. So I'm going to come up here. A couple of ways I could move that cell over here. One is I could Control X, Control V to cut and paste, or you can just move these cells around like this. Just drag them with your mouse, but you know I'm not much of a mouse guy. So Control X is another one we could add to that. So we already have learned, which you already knew coming into this course, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hotkey shortcuts. And what was the menu navigation? Oh, that was the Alt HOI. So Alt HOI, I think we learned Alt HAC, and so on. All right, so we learned 8 shortcuts. We only have about 102 to go. And then the third kind would be the function keys. And that, let's do an Alt HOI on that thing. And the function keys were, like I was saying up here, if I wanted to click on a formula, hit the F2 key, that would be a function key. F4 is another great one. So let's do F2 and F4. They're the main function keys on it. So those are our shortcut types. What I was going to say earlier was the most popular question in my course is, hey, Hooper, I didn't see that formula you typed in. Could you show me that formula? Well, that slows everybody else down. So what you want to ask is, hey, could you put a formula text? If I'll do equals and start typing formula, then there are only 2 that contain formula, and one of them is formula text. Since that one is already blue, if I hit the tab key, then it shows me that formula text needs a reference. So if I hit the left arrow, I'll get the reference I want, and then if I hit enter, it will go ahead and finish it for me. And look what it did. It put a formula in here, and the result of that formula is what is in the cell. Use kind of double use of the word formula, but the formula text of this cell shows the formula that's in that cell. And so if I wanted to copy that down here, I'd see that big, long, ugly formula that's in here. Zoom out just a little bit so we have some more room to work with. So yeah, this is a hard way to look up this letter grade. Besides, it's hard looking at that D. Let's go back to at least an 85. And by the way, when that annoying thing comes up, I'm hitting the escape key, which is, let's call it Hoop's favorites, because I have several, but escape is probably even better than undo. Okay, so letter grade. We could do it this way with just nested ifs. And eventually Microsoft figured out, hey, people are doing a lot of that and it's really hard to look at. Let's give them a better way to do it. Let's give them the IFS statement. And so here it would say IFS, and look what it's asking for. It's asking for a logical test for 1. And if that test is true, then give it the value when that's true. So what it's saying is the first thing we tested is C14 greater than equal to 90. C14 greater than or equal to 90. And if so, we do our A. If not, now all it really means is I don't have to write the if statement again. Now I could say C14 greater than or equal to 80 would be a B. C14 greater than or equal to 7. And then the last test I want to give it, I can't just say F like I did over here. I have to give it something that's going to be true. And I used to do something like, well, I know that 1 is equal to 1. That's true. If that's true, then we'll go ahead and give it the last option, which is F. But that's kind of silly. So let's, instead of saying 1 equals 1, let's just give it the true statement. Now notice it's actually an Excel function that says true. And I don't have to put it in quotes. It's not a word, it's not text, it's a Boolean operator, is what they call a Boolean value. So Alt HAC to center that. And if I copy that formula text down here, you know, it doesn't look that much better, but I'll tell you, ifs is easier to work with than nested ifs. Neither one of them is very good. Some of you are saying, gosh, why don't you just VLOOKUP this number over here and go to the second column, and you don't want an exact match. In fact, you want an approximate match. So we're just going to leave that range lookup empty. Now, if this is Greek to you, go Google VLOOKUP. I won't waste time here telling you what it means. There are a million good sites that you could probably ask Siri and should tell you what VLOOKUP does. But check it out and see if this gives us the right answer. I'm going to cut and paste that over here, Alt HAC, copy that formula text down, and this is a much better way to look this up for several reasons. One is if I decided, you know what, I'm going to do a little bit of a curve here, and I'm going to say anybody who gets more than a 50 gets a D. So what would that do? Let's say we're going to change this one to 60. Now that 68 earns me a C, because look what I'm doing. Here I'm actually referring to some other cells that when they change, my formula will work correctly. Back here, the only cell I was referring to was right here. So if I change the scoring up here, then it doesn't work. So that's modeling rule number 1. So if we use these values in here, 90, 80, 70, when we could have used some kind of formula up here, we would have broken modeling rule number 1. So let me get that back to 85, put these back to 60 and 70 so that everybody's happy. That was a VLOOKUP. Let's see if we like that VLOOKUP. What if for some reason I had to move things around and I said, oh, I'm just gonna cut this, paste it over here. Does our VLOOKUP work? Ooh, no, it doesn't. These still work, but we sure don't like them. Let me start by showing you something called match. Match says take some lookup value and find it in an array. And in this particular case, we do want a match type that says find the largest value that is less than or equal to the lookup value. Well, 0 is less than 85, but so is 60 and 70 and 80. But 80 is the largest one of these values that is less than 85. And by the way, these need to be placed in ascending order. So we got that. So if I'm highlighting this less than, I can hit the tab key and it will put the 1 in for me. Or I could just type the 1 and close that parentheses. So now I know that I want the fourth one of these. Well, let me show you something else. If I had an index function, index happens to look in a reference, look in an array rather. So I'm using the top version of this. I'm looking in an array and I want to find a certain row number in there. The row number I want to find happens to be 4. Now, if this array also had multiple columns, I could give it a column number, but since column number has those square brackets around it, I don't need to do that. I can just quit here. And so this found the B by looking in the 4th row. I'm going to nest those in a minute, but first I want to show you what would happen if I cut that and pasted it over here. VLOOKUP, if you go look on Google about VLOOKUP, it wants to find this number in the leftmost column. But the way we're doing it here, we're just matching that and we're indexing that. So it works fine. What we'd like to do is nest this match formula inside this. Instead of looking at C19, I want to come over here, hit F2, hit Control A to get everything, except the equal sign. I'll delete the equal sign and say Control A. I want to cut that because all I'm going to do is paste that formula over here in place of C19. So see what I'm doing now? I'm indexing this blue array by the match that I find by looking up this red value C14 in this purple array. And then we still get our B. So I'm going to cut that, paste it over here, do an Alt-HAC. As many times as I do Alt-HAC, it'd be a pain to have to reach up here and click that button. All right, and this is called index match. I'm doing Alt-HOI to get that a little wider. Copy that formula text down. And so we've looked at 4 ways that we can get from a score to a letter grade. And that's probably a good stopping place. I am going to come back up here, cut and paste that so that the VLOOKUP works again. All 4 of these should change when these numbers change, but not all of them change when this data changes. So we definitely prefer the index match in pretty much every situation of this. I'm going to stop this video now. I'm almost 25 minutes into it. And when we take it back up, we will look at goal seek and data tables.